From Subplay Creative, I'm Monroe Jones, and this is My Name Is Sheba, the fictional story of iconic jazz R&B artist Sheba Hawkins, written around the original music from the album of the same name by singer-songwriter Kandace Springs. For more behind-the-scenes info on the creators of the story and the music, visit mynameissheba.com. Chapter 1. Sheba Chronicles Interview, Spring 2019. After trivial chit-chat, Carter Baird from Vanity Fair went into record mode. Check. Sheba Chronicles Interview, Sheba Hawkins, Session 1, 5/23/19. Okay, let's start from the beginning. There's a long pause. Then, I suppose I'll jump around a bit, but at some point we'll reach the beginning. Is that okay? That's fine, said Carter. Whenever you're ready. Long pause. My name is Sheba. New York City, fall 1990. It was no small feat to be considered a resident artist at the club Tony Bennett hailed as the best jazz room in the city. Even when Burg and Colette weren't doing a full set, they'd often be invited up to end the night, especially rainy, fall, New York nights like this one, overlooking Central Park with the tune that had become their signature closer. It's the kind of moment the locals who frequented Dizzy's would bring out-of-town friends in for. And on this particular night, under a white spot, as the duo ended with the crowd favorite, a jazz R&B hybrid called Rain Falling, the audience was fully engaged, leaning forward and providing the stomps and claps enthusiastically, right on cue, just as they had so many nights before.
Our love will always be what we're here. As morning breaks forth the dew, so my heart breaks love for you. The moon glows in the sky. We remain as you and I, rain falling to the ground, listening to quenching the thirst in my heart, revealing a whole new start.
Like a scene in a movie, it brought the whole room together. And as Burg ended the tune, solo on piano, with the signature melody, you could hear a pin drop. And then, loud, lengthy applause. It was a love fest, and the people left with what they came for. These were the moments Burg and Colette lived for. The fact that they, two kindred spirits, got to share something so special on a regular basis was not lost on them. And this night was the perfect moment. Rain drizzling down the sides of the large windows, blurring the lights of the Manhattan skyline. If there were ever a healthy escapism or euphoric drug without harmful side effects, surely this was it. And just like that, it was over. As typical, they hung out for small talk as the endorphins wore off. And while the bartender and waitstaff closed out, the manager came over and gave them cab fare to say thanks for coming in on their night off. Anytime Burgundy and Blue showed up, it made for a good night at the club. The manager knew everyone there would be coming back. It was the least he could do, and at that point, it was a luxury they couldn't afford. The long cab ride was quiet. It was a late night after a long day, and reality was starting to seep back in the closer they got to home. By the time they made it back to the East Village, Colette had fallen asleep on Burg's shoulder. When they arrived, he gave her a gentle nudge, paid the driver, and they hopped out. Burg unlocked and opened the door to the tiny, dark apartment. They shuffled in, relocked the door, and tossed the keys on the kitchen table. The semblance of routine made him feel like an adult. They'd only been out of school 5 or 6 months, but their world felt very different now. Most everyone in their friend group had taken jobs and moved on, but not them. They decided to stay, stick it out, and give it a shot. The feeling in their empty little community now was not unlike a popular beach spot one might visit in mid-January when the restaurants are empty, shops are closed up tight, and the sky is cold and gray. It's not the same. As they wearily climbed in bed and turned out the light, the room was dark, quiet, and still. Although there was a slight head ring, and they could still hear laughter, music, and the hum of the monitors in their ears, now, after a brief high, they were coming back down. Burg and Colette knew they loved each other. They wouldn't trade places with anyone, but they needed to figure it out. Burg wondered if this is what it meant to pay your dues. They lay on their back, stared at the ceiling, and chatted about the day and the night. The small talk was affectionate, but with an underlying tension. They were both too tired to go there tonight. Burg wondered if this was just his imagination. "Baby, you killed it tonight," he said, fishing. "We were a great team. We kill it every night," said Colette. It's the response he wanted. Good. We're okay, he thought. Then, slightly long, awkward silence. "Burg, what are we gonna do?" Now he knew it was unavoidable. What do you mean?" he said, knowing full well where she was going. "This is a hard road," she said quietly, her voice a little shaky. "We're barely making ends meet. I know we share this dream, but hardly anyone makes it doing this. Our friends, they're gone. They're on their way. They're starting life." Burg was glad the room was dark, because he knew there were tears flowing. "Baby, we're starting life too. Do you think any of them know what they're doing? They just threw darts and landed on what they're doing. We've known what we wanted our whole life. We used to talk about this. We're soulmates. We got the disease, right?" Burg said, honest, but trying to lighten the moment. "We do," she said. "We got the disease." Colette was smiling, but the streetlight shining through the window finally revealed her tears. More silence. And then, with eyes on the ceiling, Colette said, "I'm pregnant." James Burgundy Hawkins was a gifted black kid raised in the South. He came from a musical family that had roots everywhere, from New Orleans to Mississippi to St. Louis. And that heritage and all those musical styles flowed right through Burg's fingers to the piano, even though much of that music he'd never heard from his Germantown suburb. He'd grown up on a steady diet of 70s and 80s pop R&B, but he played and sang like an old soul. By the time the Hawkins gift had trickled down to him, Burg was the only one in his immediate family with the talent, passion, and drive to pursue it. In Burg's family, the Hawkins gift was seen as a double-edged sword, and often spoke of more as an obsession or a disease than a gift. That's because the family stories handed down through Burg's dad, while fascinating and something to be proud of, were also filled with struggle and depression. Growing up hearing these stories over and over, Burg just assumed that musical giftedness, creativity, depression, and struggle were inseparable, part of a package. In later years, however, Burg, through his own experience, would come to know the disease simply as the pull of the music, a siren song which captivates those who hear it, making it impossible to resist. His dad, Dr. James B. Hawkins Sr., an anesthesiologist who'd been a talented sax player, was determined to break the chain. And as a teen, he shoved his sax under the bed the year he graduated from high school and left for college. Those family stories that came through Burg's dad were always filtered through the lens of, music's a great hobby, but the time comes when you gotta get a real job. That mindset, which Burg saw through and recognized as fear, would later become a source of tension between the two of them. A place they didn't go, but they both knew the road Burg would take. Burg knew he had the disease, and his dad, who'd self-medicated with the delusion that a stable career would bring happiness, was torn between regret for the road not taken and concern for his son's welfare. So the passion they both shared, one that could have been a touch point the two of them could bond around, was never discussed. The closest thing they ever came to a heart-to-heart was a conversation that ended with an agreement that Burg could do whatever he wanted after he finished college, which his dad would pay for if he kept the deal. Burg chose NYU. He was no fool, and it turns out he was academically gifted as well. He graduated with a law degree in intellectual property. He loved his dad and was motivated to please him, but they both knew that law was not Burg's first love. He'd been drawn to the Manhattan jazz community ever since he was little. And sitting at the feet of his paternal grandfather, he'd hear the stories of his uncle, jazz great Duck Hawkins, a multi-instrumentalist who'd become famous playing tenor sax with Benny Goodman, Fletcher Henderson, and just about everyone who was anyone from that era. That blood was running through Burg's veins, and he always knew, somehow, if he could just get there. And although he'd never admit it, deep down, his dad did too. Burg never regretted going to NYU. He liked school, loved the city, and found a great group of talented music geek friends he really identified with, one of whom was Colette Blue. Burg and Colette met in the fall of Burg's last year of law school and Colette's senior year as a journalism major. They had mutual friends, but had just missed each other until an open mic night at Arturo's, a cozy Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village that served pizza and jazz 3 nights a week, brought them together. "All right, Colette, you're up. Get up here," barked the manager on the mic who hosted the event on Thursday nights. He loved Thursdays. The beer and pizza flowed, and occasionally, a couple of pints in, some NYU kid would screw up the courage, jump up, and do a tune that would blow the house away. You never knew. And when it happened, it was always out of left field. Cole, as her friends called her, was a frequent guest who sat in often. Everyone knew they were in for something special when she got behind the mic. "Okay, I got a song, but it's a little obscure. I need somebody to play for me. Who knows Nina Simone?" 8 or 9 hands shot up. "Who knows My Baby Just Cares for Me?" 1 hand shot up. It was Burg Hawkins. Colette just smiled at him. It was all he needed. He ambled up casually, but his heart was racing. He sat down at the piano, she lowered the mic, and sat on the end of the bench next to him. And the whole room felt an unexplainable charge in the atmosphere, even before the first note had been played. Burg starts. Cole comes in. "My baby don't care for shows. My baby don't care for clothes." Everybody knew they were seeing something rare and special, but they had no idea they were witnessing history. For years, the kids in that room and many wannabes would recount that first ever performance of Burgundy and Blue at Arturo's. If you were there, you were part of an elite club. Burg and Colette stayed late on the mic that night, as stunned by the connection and magic as anyone there, and not one soul left the cafe. Colette Blue, A striking, lanky Caucasian girl of French descent with long red hair came to NYU on an academic scholarship from Louisville, Kentucky. Her parents, Charles and Jewel Blue, had moved there from New Orleans in the mid-60s after attending Tulane. Charles finished in architecture, and Jewel, 2 years behind him, dropped out when they decided to get married after Charles graduated. Jewel always intended to finish, but life took her down a different road. They'd both grown up in New Orleans, and when a major firm out of Louisville offered Charles a great opportunity, they saw it as their ticket out. They wanted to make a new way, but of course, like we all do, they carried their history with them. Jewel, whose maiden name was DuPont, had always been told by relatives that they were distantly related to the DuPonts of DuPont Chemical Company, but she never met any of them, and she never tried to reach out. If it's true, they must have been from the crazy uncle side of the family that no one ever's heard of or talks about. All Colette had ever known was these DuPonts had the music gene. Jewel played accordion. Her style, which she made her own, was a unique hybrid of French Edith Piaf jazz, blues, and show tunes, all of which had been handed down through her relatives in New Orleans. Jewel often sat in with her aunts and uncles playing around town until she married Charles. From then on, she played around the house for therapy, and occasionally for the Women's Club of Louisville, when they asked her to. By the time Colette was born, life was good in Louisville. The Blues were climbing the social ladder, and Charles had advanced in the firm, bringing unique building designs to the growing Louisville cityscape. He was on his way to becoming a partner, but it was not to be. After a long battle with lymphoma, one that drained the family emotionally, physically, and financially, Charles died when Colette was just 12 years old. Jewel played the accordion a lot more after that. Both Jewel and Colette would later look back on that season as a bittersweet gift that brought them closer together during Colette's crazy teen years. She'd grown up singing the words to the show tunes her mom had taught her, but after Charles passed away, Jewel dug deeper. She pulled out an array of songs they could bond around, everything from Billie Holiday to Dusty Springfield and others. Colette's voice comforted Jewel and captivated everyone who heard it. And as all hope for the Blue dynasty faded, they held on to each other. When Colette received the scholarship to NYU, Jewel was relieved. The last 6 years had been an intense struggle. They'd both gained more strength and character than they realized, and out of necessity had learned to survive. But both had come through the experience with their own baggage. The day that acceptance letter arrived from NYU, Jewel remembered how it felt when Charles got the offer from the firm in Louisville and said, "Cole, baby, this is your ticket out." Colette carried those words with her to New York. They were the reassuring words she'd heard every night in her mom's voice as she laid her head down on the pillow. Tonight, as she lay awake hearing the echo of the laughter and applause from Dizzy's, mixed with the conversation in the dark with Burg, those words haunted her and took on a different meaning. This chapter of My Name Is Sheba was written, recorded, and produced by me, Monroe Jones. Original song, Rain Falling, comes from the album My Name Is Sheba by Kandace Springs and can be found at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you stream music. My Baby Just Cares for Me was written by Gus Kahn and Walter Donaldson. Other original music in this episode is by Humans Win, Zur, Jason Donnelly, and Trencher Music, all of whom have royalty-free music available at Storyblocks. That's storyblocks.com. For more behind-the-scenes info on the creators of the story and the music, visit mynamessheba.com. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, leave a rating, and tell a friend. My Name is Sheba is a product of Subplay Creative.